So I'm going to go ahead and just get started. A little bit about myself. I do teach at the School of Nursing. I'm an assistant professor over there. And there we go. So this was actually my DNP project, which is a Doctor of Nursing practice. And for a DNP, we do quality improvement projects. So it's based on research, but also evidence-based practice. And we go into an agency and we do a quality improvement project. Not only have I been a nurse for 35 years, but for the past 7 years, I've worked as a per diem nurse in hospice and palliative care. And I was really interested when I was in school and even before then, what did the agency do as far as education to staff, all staff, when it comes to LGBTQ persons and end of life. And when I first started this project, I'm going to be very honest, the agency is wonderful, but we had zero education about LGBTQ persons, zero. So this was really groundbreaking because I was able to develop an education module, and the whole piece of it was to really inform staff, not only about, it was pretty basic with inclusive language and terminology, but really to give them a background about why this is important. It was more about, if we look at a vulnerable population at a vulnerable time, this is end of life. So we wanted to be able to create a space safe, not only for persons who identified as LGBTQ, but also their family or family members. So the education module started out with the 4-minute Gen Silent trailer you can get via YouTube, which was really helpful. And if you've not seen Gen Silent, I highly suggest you do. But it really brought to light how persons in their 70s and 80s or 90s who are at end of life, remember where they came from in the 40s, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. If you were gay in those decades, you didn't tell anybody, right? I mean, it was the start of discrimination, not the start of discrimination, but you didn't. And perhaps many lived a heterosexual life in a sense because they didn't want to identify as being gay or lesbian. So now those persons are now in their 70s, 80s, 90s. So they've had a lifetime of discrimination, not only from society, but from healthcare. And the research shows that we have discriminated and we continue to discriminate persons in the healthcare environment, so much so that we don't seek healthcare. And without seeking healthcare, the health declines. More persons are diagnosed with advanced cancer that are LGBTQ than those who are not, because of this fear of discrimination. So we wanted to, I got together with a work group there at the agency, and we made an education module that provided really basic information. What is inclusive language? Why do we need it? Why do we use it? How do we use it? How do we incorporate it into our everyday interactions with patients and families to make everyone have a safe space, so that if you are gay and you're at end of life, that you can be at peace and have your family who you choose at your bedside in the loving manner that needs to be there at end of life. So the terminology piece was quite interesting because we actually had our participants say the term and the definition, and that was uncomfortable for some people, so we pushed some envelopes. But the real purpose was really just to get it implemented within the agency. I started out with the inpatient hospice home staff because that's where I work, and I had a lot of support from them. We did give a 1-hour nursing education credit, which was awesome. And I did a post-module survey, which actually ended up being, you know, do you think you're going to implement this? Can you implement it? What did you think of the education module? And the good thing was 95% of the staff reported that they would be likely to implement inclusive language. But more importantly, it provided groundbreaking awareness with individual staff members who was like, I never thought about it that way. I never thought. I had one nurse when I was doing some anecdotal just conversations 2 to 4 weeks after the education module. He goes, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but I never thought about an older adult being gay. I just never thought, he goes, I don't know what I thought happened, but I never thought that they would be gay. He just never thought that. So it was really successful to the point where we now give the education module a couple times a year. So we had, like I said, did no education. And now we've adapted it to certified nursing assistants, volunteers. We've made an interprofessional education course where we've had physicians and nurse practitioners and social workers and persons from all of administration come to these education modules just to start breaking down those barriers that often happen in an agency. It also has brought us more into the community to really reach out to the local LGBTQ centers in Durham and Wake County. We're starting to talk about advanced directives and what would you like at end of life? And what are your goals at end of life? So that it's already a difficult conversation to have, end of life is, but we're just trying to really open it up, reach out to communities and let them know that we are welcoming, we are a safe space, we are a safe agency. Do not feel like you need to hide or change your ways or your views or not be open. We also were able to revise the diversity statement and made that more inclusive, as well as an interesting part, my very last little thing about sustainability. Now at time of orientation, we have stickers. I should have brought my name tag. It's a rainbow sticker that shows support. You don't have to wear it, but I will tell you, every employee that I've ever seen has the supportive rainbow sticker on their name badge. And it just makes me happy every time I see it, because it all stemmed from my DNP QI project that just opened that envelope to an agency to start having the conversation about what do we need to do for LGBTQ persons to come into the agency, feel safe, be able to receive palliative and hospice care, and feel welcome. Not only them, their partners, their families, and maybe the person themselves does not identify as gay or lesbian, but maybe their family member does, maybe their daughter, their son. So it really encompasses the whole family, and really having the staff, like the nurses, use of inclusive language, which is so important because I've been a nurse for a long time and I see it. You know, we see the male patient in the bed and the female patient at the bedside, and we automatically assume that they're married. And if we see a male in the bed and a male at the bedside, we assume they're brothers. And it's about really breaking down these assumptions about people and their families. So I was just wanted to share this project with you and to really open it up so that people know that at end of life, it is important to be able to be who you are and not feel discriminated. I think I'm right there on time, April.
You were absolutely perfect with like 31 seconds left. So thank you so much, JoAn. Thank you for the work that you do and for sharing that with us. So, by the way, for those of you who weren't here right when we started, what we're going to do is we're going to hold questions until the end. So we have 4 presenters, and then we will have kind of a Q&A at the end for everybody But we are going to go ahead and move on. Our second presenter is Oliver Cope, who is going to be presenting What Is It with Queer People and Cryptids, which I can't wait to find out the answer to, by the way. Oops. And that's time ended for you. And I can't make it stop. Okay, I think I made it stop. Now for real, Oliver, you get to start.
All right. There we go. Hey everybody, my name is Oliver. I use they, them, and ze, them pronouns, and I'm really excited to share this presentation with y'all. I wanted to talk a little bit about give me just a second to figure this out. I wanted to talk a little bit about the intersection between queer culture and cryptids. For those of you who may not know, a cryptid is just any animal or creature whose existence is debated. This includes famous examples like Bigfoot and Mothman, but some kinds of extinct animals fall into this category if people believe that they're still out there. And creatures like vampires and werewolves often fall into this category, but they're not technically considered cryptids. They're just creatures that cryptid enthusiasts really enjoy talking about. And in the recent years, there's been a lot of growth with the support and appreciation of cryptids. You see a lot of new spaces, especially in online communities and the queer community, about these spaces that are dedicated to appreciating cryptids and talking about cryptids. And the reason, part of the reason why we see so many more online spaces dedicated to talking about cryptids, we see that these spaces provide a lot of safety for queer people. You don't have to experience the there's no like threat of physical violence if you're actually, because you're not going to a real place. There's also a lot of freedom of expression that is allowed when you're doing things online and when you're doing things when you're the person running this kind of page. And so a lot of this has led to an increased amount of queer people leading these spaces and being in control of these places and changing how we talk about cryptids. And so I wanted to look at why the cryptid community specifically. The cryptid community itself is already a place where a lot of weird people tend to join up. You're talking about a community of people who are dedicated to finding evidence or supporting or investigating these creatures who most people don't believe exist, right? And so it fosters this sense of open-mindedness when you're talking to people who think, you know, that Bigfoot is out there or that Mothman is real. And so for queer people, it's really difficult to feel out of place in a place where a lot of people are talking about creatures that nobody else believes in. And so you see a lot of more queer people taking the time to interact with this space and being really interested in these creatures. And more so than just being interested in this queer or this cryptid community, you see a lot of times that cryptids as interpreted by queer people are often more queer. You see that people talk about Mothman being supportive of gay and trans rights. You see a lot of people who imagine Bigfoot as being queer. And so I wanted to look into some of the reasons why this happens so much. And I'd be, you know, it would be remiss of me not to talk about, you know, the long history of villainizing queerness that has already pushed queer people to the outskirts of society. And because cryptids embody that same kind of experience, you see queer people who see themselves in cryptids. Mothman is a cryptid who is often blamed for disasters that happen just because he's in the area before the disaster occurs. And so this feeling of being falsely framed for something is something that a lot of queer people relate to. There's also the aspect of having to stay hidden from society that a lot of queer people relate to as feeling similar to the feeling of being closeted or in the closet. There's also just a hunger for representation. Representation of queer characters has grown in the past few years, but it's also, still very, very lacking. And so a lot of queer content creators tend to rewrite the characters they identify with as queer, right? And Cryptids, with so many people who see themselves in these kinds of creatures, a lot of people feel, why wouldn't a character who is so similar to myself not be gay or trans?
1 minute.
Okay. I'll go and move on to some of the other reasons. Another big reason that queer people feel so related to cryptids is because of the fact that when queer content makers rewrite cryptids to be less scary, when they are portraying characters as family members or as like big protective like people, it's a very distinct difference that I think is best supported by the difference between, the big fluffy pictures of Mothman versus the hunting documentaries of like Bigfoot. All of those awful, really straight kind of portrayals of that. And there's a lot of power in taking these cryptids and making them soft. They're challenging the ideas of what it means to be scary and dangerous in our society, which is really similar to what queer people do when they exist in our society. Is, they're challenging the ideas of heteronormativity and cisnormativity. And there's also, there's also the idea or feeling that when queer people are fighting for cryptids, when they are supporting cryptids, it's a way to show their support for another person in the way that they wish somebody had done for them. And there are so many more reasons, and I could talk about this for hours, but in general, each individual person has a reason for identifying with cryptids or not identifying with cryptids, but there are just some really key aspects to the community of cryptids and cryptid culture that really do facilitate the connections and overlap that we see with queer people and cryptids.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Oliver. All right. I appreciate all of the people that I can see doing this. All right, so moving on to our third presentation, Melissa Clepper-Faith, who is going to be talking about mindful self-compassion for transgender or gender expansive teens. And by the way, a few people did just show up in the last few minutes, so we are going to do a Q&A, but we're going to do that at the end of everybody's presentation. All right.
All right, works better if I unmute. Can you see the screen? Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know if you're actually able to hear me.
Yes, we can hear you and we can see it. We're good.
Okay, thanks. Technology. My name is Melissa Clepper-Faith. I am a master's student in the Gillings School of Public Health. I'm also a pediatrician, and I'm working with Dr. Karen Bluth on a study of mindful self-compassion for trans and gender expansive teens. So self-compassion is the practice of treating ourselves with compassion and self-kindness, the way that you would treat your friends when they're struggling. There are three components of self-compassion: mindfulness, which has to do with keeping a balanced perspective; common humanity, which is realizing that the experiences we're having are common to all of us and are part of being human, just like the technology problem I had when I got started. Self-kindness has to do with actively striving to treat yourself with care and compassion. The self-compassion can address some of the problems that are really difficult for teens, in particular, self-judgment, criticism, the sense of being alone, the sense of not belonging, and the feeling like you're being a burden to others. These are particularly difficult for teens to handle. And probably the most important thing to remember is that self-compassion is a teachable skill. Now, when you look at the research, we see that mindful self-compassion has been studied in adults as well as teens. There have been multiple studies that have showed that self-compassion interventions lead to less anxiety, depression, and stress, and also aid in increasing resilience, or the ability to deal with what goes on in your life and bounce back. As well, it seems to lead to greater emotional well-being. So the intervention that we're doing in this study is called Making Friends with Yourself. This is a self-compassion program that was developed specifically for teens by Dr. Bluth here at UNC. And this has been used with teens worldwide and has been shown in studies, again, to be very effective. So when it has been studied in teens in general, we've seen that it does lead to decreases in anxiety, stress, and depression, and increases in resilience and life satisfaction. So why are we doing a study with trans or gender expansive teens? Well, trans and gender expansive teens have to deal with all of the struggles of being a teenager, plus they have more on their plate. They have to deal with more stress in addition. They have to deal with stigma and sometimes rejection by society, by peers, and even by their family. So we know that trans and gender expansive teens are at higher risk for depression, for self-injury, for considering suicide, having suicidal thoughts, and attempting suicide. So this is a group of teens that we feel are vulnerable and really need and deserve extra attention, so that they can, that we can give them some tools to help them deal with life better. This is a pilot study in which we're working with 3 groups of 10 to 15 trans or gender expansive teens in an 8-session mindful self-compassion program. So we're almost halfway through this study, and our preliminary results so far have showed an almost 20% reduction in depression from before to after the program. So the way that we're doing this study is that the teens are sent a link to an online survey before the course, which asks questions about mental health, about how they feel about themselves, how they perceive their lives, and their moods. And then they participate in this mindful self-compassion course, which is it is designed to foster self-compassion and mindfulness. And we're holding these via Zoom, of course, because of COVID. The nice thing about that is that we have been able to recruit teens from across the country. And this has been advantageous, I think, to some of the teens who may not have other trans teens living nearby where they can talk together. So each session in this program is comprised of videos, interactive exercises, discussions, mindfulness, meditation practices that are designed to help the teens gain these skills. After they've completed the program, then we ask them to complete the same survey, and 3 months later, again, the same survey for a 3rd time, so that we have a basis for comparison. We also are asking them, after they have taken the course, to give us feedback about what they liked and didn't like about the course so that we can improve it, and specifically so that we can give the program more specificity so that trans teens feel like their needs are being met. So for future directions, we are continuing to refine this program for trans and gender expansive teens using their feedback. We are working on developing an advisory committee, and one of the most important members in that advisory committee is a trans person, so that we can get specific feedback about what is helpful to this group of teens. And in the long run, we would like to expand this study to do a similar program with larger numbers of trans and gender expansive teens, and see if this continues to be a helpful intervention. And this is our study email, mscteens@unc.edu. Please feel free to share this with anyone you think would be interested in this program, in the Mindful Self-Awareness for Teens. We will be doing this in the future, and we would love to be able to share this with them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And once again, this makes me so happy when I see everybody. All right, so we are going to move on to our fourth and final presentation in this session. So Therese Hudson is going to be presenting on The Burden Never Laid, a modified scoping literature review examining the relationship between Black gay men and the Black church.
Second, technology has not been my friend today. There we go. Okay. The title of this research endeavor is entitled The Burden Never Laid, a modified scoping literature review examining the relationship between Black gay men and the Black church. It is typical to hear reference of a burden within any given church service in a Black church. A burden is generally known as an issue or a troublesome situation that weighs on a person. And most, if not all, Black churches may have like a physical altar with which a person is instructed to metaphorically lay down their burdens on, believing that this will allow the person to be free from the weight of their problem. I've chosen these sentiments in the title because for many Black gay men, the invitation to laying down any and all burdens is not always possible for them. Hearing and being confronted with messages condemning them on multiple occasions is one of the many burdens that Black men may carry in their affiliation with the Black church. And so this review was conducted with them in mind so that their voices may be shared of their burden that can never be laid. This is merely an outline to illustrate the flow of the presentation. Move on. According to a Gallup poll conducted in 2017, 5% of Black adults self-identify as LGBT, which is a reported increase since 2012 when it was 4.4%. According to a Pew Research Center, a religious landscape study, 79% of Black individuals surveyed self-identify as Christian, and 75% of Black individuals report that religion is very important in their lives. These statistics echo a well-known sentiment that religion is a crucial aspect of life for so many Black Americans. The Black church has a strong connection with the Black community, for those that identify as heterosexual and those that don't. The quote in the bottom left corner was taken from a minister who was interviewed for a New York Times article regarding how many churches have a don't ask, don't tell policy when it comes to non-heterosexual identifying members. In this quote, he speaks of how he would never turn anyone away from his preaching, but he is firm in his preaching that homosexuality is a sin. But what of the Black individuals who are affiliated with the Black church, who do identify as gay? What are they to do in an environment that is critical of their cultural experience and upbringing, yet disaffirms and condemns their attraction and their being? And so it is these questions and sentiments that fuel the purposes of this study. The Black church is a social entity that allows Black churchgoers to fulfill social, familial, and personal obligations. For the scope of this presentation, I focus on three major aspects of the Black church's fulfillment: the Black community, gender roles, and sexual scripts. For the purposes of this study, church is narrowly defined as a place of worship operating under Christian doctrine. The Black community throughout its history has had strong ties to the Black church. Black religious centers serve not only as a place of worship, but a space where Black people are allowed the freedom to fellowship and celebrate their beliefs, as well as their shared experiences through the lenses of their ethnic and racial makeup, and offer comfort and hope to each other. Gender roles. The Black church offers teachings that go beyond Christian theology and religious information. Through typical engagement with the Black church, churchgoers learn how they should view society and also how they should govern themselves. This also applies to reinforcement of hegemonic gender roles. Specifically for Black men, there are many messages from sermons to casual conversation defining masculinity for Black men. And lastly, sexual scripts. From the pulpit to the pew, there are numerous messages of condemnation towards non-heterosexual behavior and attraction. Whether the topic of a sermon or hushed gossip between church members, Black men are frequently informed of the general consensus of the Black church, being that homosexuality is a sin. For this scoping literature review, I was interested in studying the psychological effects that religiousness and religiosity have on Black men who self-identify as gay. And it is crucial that I define gay as individuals who identify as cisgender men and acknowledge that their sexual and romantic attraction mainly or only towards other men. Due to the time constraints for this presentation, the current pandemic, my mentor and I thought it would be best to conduct a scoping literature review. In regards to the exclusion criteria, to further narrow the range of the review, I chose to exclude references to articles consisting of research solely based on lesbianism. I also came to this decision as I narrowed my focus question mainly aimed at men who I self-identify as gay. As previously stated, any mention of the Black church in this modified scoping review is assumed to be in reference to any place of worship operating under Christian doctrine. I chose to exclude quantitative studies as a nature of the study in favor of qualitative studies because I'm interested in the voice of the respondent, and I aim to prioritize the voices of the lived experiences of Black gay men who are affiliated with the Black church. For the inclusion criteria, to narrow things down, I decided to include studies conducted in the US, given the demographic of concern for this research endeavor and how unique the African-American experience is in regards to the Black church. I chose to use peer-reviewed articles to maintain a higher standard of research, and I chose a publication date range of 10 years or greater to have a greater understanding of qualitative research being conducted on my demographic of interest. Search terms. So I used 3 search terms for this modified scoping literature review, Black men, gay, and church, to help focus the scope. For the databases, I used the North Carolina State University library system to gain access to 3 widely known psychology databases, PsycInfo, PsycArticles, and psychology databases. So before I included the exclusion criteria, I had around like 39 PsycInfo articles, 2 PsycArticles, and about 20 psychology database articles. And once I submitted the inclusionary and exclusionary criteria, there were about 61 relevant articles. Once I did the inclusionary criteria, there were 61 articles. After having the exclusionary criteria, there are only 7 articles that fit my main themes. And so the main themes from those 6 or 7 were Black church, fear, and a need for coping. And so for the Black church, as previously stated, it's an entity that provides more than just a space for Black congregants to worship and share religious doctrine. It provides social support to members as well as surrounding communities. It is also a source of morality for a large portion of the Black community. There was a study done in 2018 by Pingle and Baumeister. It was a qualitative study, and they found that even those who have no affiliation with the church still have more guidelines based in religion. Fear. Another pervasive theme throughout this literature is fear. There's a fear of stigma from being gay, which is also amplified if Black gay man is also contracts HIV. Studies have shown that Black gay men with HIV fear rejection and other negative responses as a result of their disclosure. Another type of fear expressed by participants across studies is the fear of losing contact with the Black church. So that those cultural and familial ties that are supported by the Black church are at risk of being severed due to the coming out process or even the thought of it for Black gay men. And so for this reason, many of them choose to hide their sexual orientation by any means necessary to hold tightly to this deeply ingrained community. The third main theme prevalent through this study was the need for coping strategies. Given the lack of identity affirmation from preached messages and general ideology from so many Black churches, it becomes clear the need to seek balance between one's sexuality and religious beliefs. And so coping strategies range from scrutinizing the preaching, condemning messages, to also separating their identities based on the space where one finds themselves. So for instance, if you're in a church space, you're more likely to highlight your religious identity more so than your sexuality. There are three main areas that require further investigation in the future, and the first would be socialization process. Current qualitative studies in regards to race, sexuality, and religiosity of Black gay men lack substantive information on the socialization process of the participants of the study. When studying the psychological ramifications that religiosity has on Black gay men, it's also necessary to take into account their gender socialization processes. Intersection of racism and homophobia. Given the intersectionality the Black gay men possess, that of being a Black man in America and also a gay man, that opens them up to two systems of oppression at the same time, racism and homophobia. And so in studying the psychological trauma that can occur for Black gay men due to their affiliation with the Black church, proper examination requires an in-depth understanding and analyzation of how the intersections of racism and homophobia can manifest within the religious arena of the Black church. Thirdly, the gender role ideology. Future implication of the scoping literature review deals with gender role ideology. Of the 7 research articles used in my review, very few mentioned the impact that Black